Hello, everyone, and welcome to the South Dakota Art Museum. My name is Donna Merck. I'm the director here, and it is my absolute pleasure to see such a great turnout tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Yes, you can clap. It's okay. Give yourself a hand. Well, we are here tonight nearing the end of these two fabulous exhibitions, Dakota Modern, the art of Oscar Howe, and Continuum, honoring Oscar Howe's legacy. And so tonight we're really focusing in on this incredible legacy and the artists who are part of this legacy. But before we get started, I just wanted to say a big thank you and hope that you'll help me thank our sponsors for these exhibitions. For Continuum, our sponsors that we really need to say a big thank you to: our First Bank and Trust, a generous anonymous supporter, Meyer Orthodontics, Deb and Van Linkeek, and I'm blanking. How awful is that? Oh, SDSU's Office of the President, and we'll keep it as an employee of SDSU. That is not the one I should have forgotten. But I look to the audience when I'm thinking about this, because not only do we have wonderful donors who are here, but we have amazing supporters also in the audience, because SDSU provides significant operational support for the South Dakota Art Museum, and because we also receive some support for the South Dakota Arts Council, then when members and donors like you give dollars to the Art Museum, you are supporting incredible exhibitions like you see in the museum right now, and incredible programs like this one. So with no further ado, I am going to introduce our Curator of Education and Outreach, Abigail Ramsbottom, who put this great event together.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And I'll just say again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Abigail Ramsbottom, and I'm the Curator of Education here. And I don't know if I amplify my voice as well as Donna. So testing. There we go. Yeah. Okay. So I just want to briefly introduce the artists and speak a little bit about this exhibition that we're coming here together for. So Continuum, honoring Oscar Howe's legacy. This exhibition seeks to stimulate contemplation of Oscar Howe's immeasurable impact as artist, mentor, educator, and advocate by sharing pairings of works by Howe students and their selected proteges, as well as art pieces by American Indian artists who have gleaned inspiration from Howe's art and ideas. Tonight, we'll be hearing from 3 artists who are some of the proteges of the students of Oscar Howe. Unfortunately, artist Linus Woods, who is coming from Canada, experienced some travel issues and he will not be able to make it. However, we have 3 wonderful artists here with us tonight. And I'll just briefly introduce the artists and then I'll leave it over to them. So Duane Goes Center, Oglala, Lakota, was born along Rapid Creek Indian Camp, Rapid City. Jhon is considered one of the early silversmiths in the transitional modern era of Lakota metalwork. Jhon acknowledges Herman Red Elk, 1918 to 1986, Yanktonai Sioux, as a mentor and inspiration in life and art. And Herman studied for 2 summers under Oscar Howe. Virginia Poorman is a beater currently living in Rapid City, and Bryan Akipa, visual artist, flute maker, and flute player, who was a student of Oscar Howe for 6 semesters at the University of South Dakota, identified Virginia as one of his proteges. And Evans Flammond Sr., Sichangu Lakota, was raised on the Rosebud and Pine Ridge reservations. A self-taught artist, Flammond works in a variety of media, ranging from ledger art and hide painting to beadwork and wood carving. And Bryan Akipa also identified Evans as his protege in this artistic continuum. I want to ask that you please hold your questions until the end. We'll have an audience Q&A, but please join me in welcoming these artists. And we'll start with Jhon.
Hello. We talk here. Particularly, Jhon Goes, I'm very changed up a little. I'm honored here. I'm just offering my handshake and really do want to speak from my heart. First of all, I just want to acknowledge, the fact that myself, I didn't really ever call myself an artist until, I don't know, it just kind of fell in somehow. But I've always understood myself as a creative, Lakota creative, because I do so many other things. Okay. All right there. So I do consider myself as a creative, Lakota creative, because I do a lot of other things as well. And amongst all that, I'm a grandpa and dad and uncle, brother, cousin, so many things I am, so that artist thing is just a little bit of what I really am, But I just have to back up and say a little bit about the inspiration that has been referenced as Herman Red Elk. Yeah, really kind of when I thought about that and putting together this whole continuum thing, and I was asked to kind of be part of it, yeah, I knew Herman, and it really dawned on me because in those days in the early 70s, I was making things, doing a lot of things as we do as Lakotas. But he's the one that kind of, when I thought about it, really inspired me to kind of look more at what he saw as art himself. He was from another generation before me. He was also a World War II veteran. But importantly, he talked about things we do as Lakota. He spoke Lakota language. So to hear and understand our creativity from that paradigm of Lakota language is kind of different than what we look about today about art. It's interpreted by English language. So that's one thing when I really thought about that inspiration. He worked at the Sioux Museum in Rapid City, South Dakota. I used to come to Wombly once a month and buy supplies from Rapid City, and I'd stop there and visit, and But anyway, he found out that I made these bustles we call mukchela in our language. They're all made out of eagle feathers, and yeah, I made a lot of those bustles for different dancers. Didn't really know that. So that my origins of creativity go back to when I was a little boy. My grandmother and her relatives all gifted me with, a dance regalia, and I used to, after every season, I'd take it apart and refigure it again for another dance. And so I was just doing all that as, as a little Lakota boy, But so when it was being spoken Lakota about all these things and that belong to regalia, it came from a people that didn't have this word artist. They're all creative, and it was a part of a culture of reciprocity where they gifted everything to everybody. These things weren't commercially available either. So I guess some of my origins of creativity come from that foundation. So it's really even carried me today where I'm really not that much of a market-driven artist because I do make jewelry and stuff, but it actually started for family and extended family, and it just goes on and on like that. That's the major focus of where I'm and how I make things. But moving into the realm of the art world in major society, I was afforded my first art show at the Sioux Museum in 1975. So you could see some of the items I had put into that show, and that little quote of me is pretty simple. It says, I mostly like to make things that people can use or like to wear. I like to work with my hands and make things for Indian people. I mean, that's pretty simply said. Yeah, and I was pretty young, and then I was just telling my nephew here, I wasn't a good speaker in them days. In fact, I used to not want to even stand up in front of people. Told my nephew here, I used to misspell words just to sit down in a spelling bee because I didn't want to be. But Herman wanted me to display all the bustles that I made. In fact, just that alone impressed upon me that me working at the Sioux Museum thought that our culture, the things that we made were really relevant to the art world as well. So yeah, I started asking my friends I made bustles for and things like that. And we were going to have this art show of my bustles. But the Indian Arts and Craft Board, as my nephew, I said, they gonged it, you know. So I didn't get to do that, but I still wanted to have that show. But I was actually going to the museum studies program at the University of Colorado, so I was already studying different forms of creating. And so so these are just things I put together for my first art show in 1975. You know, so I was doing bronze sculptures back then, and I had already been carving pipes, but I was making adornment pieces like silverwork and such, and I was starting engraving and all that stuff. So it's just a kind of going back to my origins in getting into that mainstream medium of art, you know. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of kind of where I kind of progressed towards recently. You see on the side there, all of us Lakotas know what that is. That's a Keemsla braid. Well, I myself, I do lapidary work, so these are Fairburn agates you find. They're a state gem of South Dakota. So this is giving you a brief millennium jump almost into what I do today. And this references part of the story where the young lady married a star, you know, and she tried to climb down from the star world on the braid of Keemsla. But anyway, she fell to her death and posthumously gave birth to what we call Starboy in our stories. But Starboy's mother, who passed away, and her husband was so came down with grief, and he was paralyzed with grief. But anyway, he became the North Star, stationary star. So that Keemsla braid pendant, brooch, even goes back to the time of all the old ladies I knew that were my grandmother's relatives. They all wear shawls, they all wear pins, you know. So that's all the things I've ever created were for adornments. This really fits in with what I call the Lakota world, you know. And the Lakota lady bought that. That really made me feel happy because she's going to wear that in the Lakota way. Next slide. There again, there it is, you know, as it is. Keemsla brooch. Thank you. Next slide. This one is actually very interesting because called a Wiohamble Wojuha, Dream Keeper. Often I used to do tours. People always wanted to see Wounded Knee, the massacre site. So I give tours there, but I know everything about the story, where the soldiers were, where the massacre happened. Told that story many times, and it always kind of made me feel sad all the time. And then I realized that, well, yeah, we have that story, and it keeps us in victimhood and sorrow. And I thought about those victims that were killed, you know. But it dawned on me, how can I honor those people? Well, I thought that if I could live the Lakota way of life in the best way I could, is to honor those lives that didn't get to be lived out. Lakotas, we like Wojampi, we like rye bread, we like Washtunkala Wahampi, and you know, all these good things, you know, that they didn't get to have. You know, so these things I teach my grandsons and all that. They know how to make Washtunkala, you know, just so there's so many things that we do as Lakotas that really kind of emphasize the good life and how we live culturally. So when I was given an opportunity to be in a show about Wounded Knee, you know, I wanted to make a piece that really exemplifies hope, moving out of victimhood, getting back into the Lakota way of life again. And so that buffalo horn even represents the fact that we are tribe, we have 2 buffalo herds, you know, so the buffalo really is coming back. So we are becoming again very spiritual people with the buffalo, you know. So this is just a place to put your dreams. But there again, this is an adornment piece. It's a long braided buffalo hide lanyard, and I painted it red so it could represent the people that were killed at Wounded Knee. But I engraved on the silver cap for this Ojuha 4 directions, and I embedded in it and set a Fairburn agate. And this agate surfaced during the geologic uplift of the Black Hills. So these things like this that I do represent so many things about the Lakota way of life and where we come from, what we believe, you know, things like that, just to inspire us to be dreamers again, have hope, move forward, get out of victimhood, face the dream again. Next slide. So my engraving, you know, it reaches a pinnacle where it kind of, you know, it's very technical, but it's very something beautiful. But in my career, like I said, I'd like to be known as a rodeo cowboy too, you know. So in this exhibition, I was invited to be called "We Are a Horse Nation." I thought about it. I didn't live in the 1800s, so why would I want to make something that, you know, represented then? I'm a modern Lakota, you know, but I made a lot of trophy buckles for rodeos. But I decided to enter into this show 2 bronc riders who were my childhood heroes. Joe Chase from Berthold and Art Lawrence from Eagle Butte. They're bronc riders, you know, the Lakota bronc riders. So I wanted to commemorate them, because Lakota bronc riders, they don't try to break a horse. They match their spirit with the horse, you know. And that's what these men really inspired in me. So this exemplifies a lot of the technical things I've accomplished in doing metalwork, was the scroll engraving, modeling and casting rodeo figures, using a sign of accomplishment of these eagle feathers, and of course the four directions, the motif there. And I know how to do parfait setting for gemstones. So those are rubies that I set in there. So that's where my craft or my art has evolved into exemplifying something like that. It's Lakota, but it's modern, you know, has inspiration, you know. Next slide. So this piece comes from another exhibition I was invited to be in. I never really apply for exhibitions. I have in the past, but it's really not what I do. But when I'm invited, I really do my best to put together what matches the intent of the exhibition. And this comes from an ongoing exhibition called The Creation Story. And that's being developed by Keith Braveheart and other signature artists. And I had to do a piece that talks about Eon, the first rock. I have to tease all my other artist friends. I said, what I created with nothing came from Hobby Lobby. I said, but those are agate. The big agate in the middle comes from the Black Hills. That's a Fairburn agate that I cut and polished. You know, I cut a big nodule and made a slab out of it and ground it down and polished it and inlaid it in this piece of wood. This wood, I found this tree that fell, been laying there for many, many years. And I go for a walk along Rapid Creek and I see this tree all the time. All these things I was thinking, and I finally was going to create something. I thought of that tree, and I had a friend who cut a slab off of it. That wood was so hard because they'd been laying there I don't know how many years, cleared by nature. And then I went out in the Badlands, where I always go anyway for hunting for agates. And I tried to find 4 colored rocks. I thought it'd be easy, but it was really hard to find 7 red rocks, 7 yellow rocks, 7 white rocks, 7 black rocks, 28 of them. Very metaphorical for a number that we all adhere to in the Lakota culture, 4s and 7s. 28. 28 poles in a Sundance Harbor. 28 ribs in a buffalo. 28 days in a lunar moon, in a lunar month, you know. All these kind of things that come from nature. But the rocks in themselves are an example of, these are called tukashis, which are little rocks that Eon created, his little relatives. These are good spirit rocks that a lot of good medicine resides in. But the middle rock represents Ea, the first rock, when he turned himself inside out and his blood became water. And then he became brittle and became rock, you know. So all these iconic images are on there that really exemplify our belief system, our spirituality. The yellow is the sun. All these things that were in creation, when creation began, is also our genesis as Lakota people, where we develop and seeing the relationship between the sun, moon, stars, wind, light, darkness. All those are our foundation to our spirituality and belief systems. So this is my presentation, what I think is the Wakan feature of Ea, is all of those things. And it's still there. Ea is with us, with the rocks that we see everywhere. We see them, we use them in gravel, in our roads, our everything. I just kind of, the world is all built on rock, you know. So that's one of the pieces I do. That's you know, so it all evolved from long time ago when Herman Red Elk was talking about our Lakota ways and Lakota language. You know, it's really influenced my worldview in doing art. A lot of these things I do, you know, they're that's not for sale. That's an item of cultural patrimony that belongs to the Lakota. Looking for a museum that really wants to house that and give it its honor to talk about creation again. Yeah. I think that's the last of my slides. Oh, one more slide. That sun dancer on the side is, I did that in 1975. You know, like I said, talking with Herman and that genre of artists, you know, I had uncles that were artists. One of them was a famous artist also named Victor Pepion. He was a Blackfoot man, married, and I'd seen his art. But they were doing those kind of art things in their generation and flowed over to me. That's where I've been to many sun dances with my grandma, you know. I always have fond memories of the Sundance camp. And in those days when I was a little boy, all the sun dancers were older men. So that's where this sun dancer here is an older man. Kind of done in the old time way, you know. That was bronze. I modeled that all in wax, and I had a job working at a foundry, so that's what I did. I cast that. My modern stuff I do today, it involves the rocks from Dakota country. And would you believe that blue rock on the top comes from the Badlands? It's a blue chalcedony. Doesn't have a name, so I call it Sioux blue. But that Fairburn agate and the motif and the buffalo's face, that comes from the top of the Black Hills, a place called Teepee Canyon. It's a Teepee Canyon Fairburn agate. And then the body of that effigy is made out of what they call jasper. I find that in the Black Hills too, multicolored and all that. So all these things, you know, are earthborn materials, you know, that represent, you know, our belief system, all these things that I think of, you know, kind of coalesce in what I do in the adornment pieces. But I do have a mantra I call it the art of personal adornment. One of the true forms of Lakota art is that we lived in beauty, we wore things. Everything we wore was decorated, embellished and such. So that in itself is a brooch that, again, I hope there's a emerging field in our modern world of Lakota art is fashion. All these ladies are developing fashions, and I'm hoping to be part of my adornment pieces will enter into that fashion world as well. So that's what I do, and I appreciate the time and effort to talk about my work. Well, check that. Beyond it.
Afternoon. My name is Virginia Poorman from Memphis City. Yeah. And I think beading has been a part of my life, part of me, my entire lifetime. And I never really considered myself an artist either, but I just been beading most of my life. I had a older sister that was a bead worker, and she more or less taught me her skill. And so that's what I've been doing. These are what I make are medallions, and that one right there, it's a shadow box. I just recently finished that. And the bag there, the rose with the feather, that was my daughter's when she started jingle dress dancing many, many years ago. And then those are just some of the medallions that I have done. But I really haven't done beading that much lately until starting in January. I started my shadow box. And I've had my mom was a bead worker, and then I had a grandma, and then my sister and myself. And I first met Bryan, I don't know how many years ago that was. And he more or less approached me one time, that he wanted me to bead a vest for him. So I did that. I don't know how long it took me. It took us about 10 years or so. We used to call it the traveling vest because it, went more places than I ever been. But he still has it. And then and I did enter tribal arts many, many years ago. I won twice, second place, and an honorable mention for a beaded cap. Those are leggings that I beaded for my daughter, matching leggings with my the beaded bag. And these are some of my medallions that I made. I've done a lot of beadwork for different people in the past. And this took me, I started this January 27th. It's my shadow box. And I finished it mid-April, I think. And I guess it's just beaded like a medallion. It's geometric designs. And
Where do you get inspiration from?
Where do what?
Inspiration, what are your patterns? Like I noticed those two, the blue and the green. Where do you get your inspiration from?
I don't know. A lot of it is just it just comes to mind. And sometimes late at night I'm sleeping and stuff like that. It comes to in my dreams sometimes, where I'm just, and so in the mornings I'll get up and kind of, but, and that's that was the bib that I made for Bryan. And he more or less, and it's all done on canvas. Everything was done on canvas back then, but right now I haven't really done anything on canvas. It's more or less I don't know what it's called, kind of like felt, but it's a little bit, the texture's a little bit more hard. And the well, Brian's a flute player, and so he wanted he's the one that drew this. He drew this, and then so I just drew it on canvas. And he did the rest, I guess. This, I'd say it took me about a month, I think. Months to do.
For those of us who are still learning about beadwork, can you tell us what size beads are and how size is determined and what kind of stitch you use?
Well, some of it is lazy stitch, and then I use a size 13 bead. And it's I think Brian did the
visual.
and this I guess maybe I had this that I wanted to do this many, many years ago, but it just never really, I just never really sat down and actually did it. And in beginning of this year, I just thought, well, maybe I better get started on it. So I did. And but it's, to me, this is like one of my dreams I've been trying to make for quite a while, and I've accomplished it. So but I think that my beadwork I do my beadwork a lot because I think of my the sister that taught me how to do beadwork. She passed away when she was 28, quite young. And for a long time there, I didn't do beadwork. And then all of a sudden I just started doing beadwork. Like, I think it was like a year after she had passed away. Because our Lakota culture, we say that when somebody that we love very dearly passes on or dies, we set aside something that we really like to do. And I did that for her. And then a year later, I took out my beadwork and I started beading. And one of the awards I won at Tribal Arts was for a beaded cap. And I remember one time Bryan approached me with this beaded cap. He said, "Do you think you could ever make something like this? Or do you think you could make something like this?" And I said, "Yeah, I can try, so I did." And then he said, "You should just enter it into Tribal Arts." I did. And then that one got honorable mention, I think it was. And then I did some side panels for him that got second place. And then so I think when an artist, when artists do whatever type of art they do, there's a ripple effect affects all of us. It goes down, you know, through everybody. So.
Have you taught many people how to be?
Probably some of my nieces, and then I did teach my daughter. My daughter knows how to make medallions, but she just really hasn't, you know, done any beadwork just because of everybody's has a busy life now, you know, they don't have time to be sitting down or whatever, but I still try and teach my granddaughters. I have 4 grandchildren, 3 granddaughters and 1 grandson. And I try and encourage them, you know, try and sit with them and bead and stuff like that. But it's just, you know.
Check, 1, 2. I used to be in a band a long time ago, and how we check the treble, you go, and if you get a crisp noise, then you know your treble's on. Uncle John here has a deep voice, so there's a lot of people in the past that I went to many of his lectures, and after hearing him talk, the other guys just get up, slowly walk out. He's that good. But I'm gonna hang in there this time. So my name is Evans Flammond, Senior. I specialize in ledger art, but I did many things since I first started my, just like my Uncle John said, I mean, it's true to all artists. When I first started doing art, period, like when I was 7, by the time I was like 16, I didn't consider myself an artist. I just did it. Then it takes someone else to come up to you and say, even like when I was 10 or 11, if I draw a horse to say, man, you're an artist, that word really didn't mean anything to me because that's just what I did every day. So now, like within the last 10 years or something, when someone calls you an artist, I stop and think about it and I think, wow, man, I am an artist. I mean, it's a real interesting feeling, but I wasn't trying to be an artist. I just did it since I was 7. But I really enjoy doing it, and throughout my career, as like accepting that it's a career and different obstacles of challenges my mind, what I try to portray on canvas or ledger. There's one thing that my Uncle John taught me. He said, never be afraid of color. And a lot of people kind of get offended by this who are stuck in a certain realm of using certain colors and they don't venture out to use any other color. And he was right. Don't ever be afraid to experiment with color. Every color you see on any kind of creation, I tell people on the first day of spring, think about it and then execute it one day about a month into it and take a walk in a prairie. And every color you see in my creations, you're going to see growing from the earth. That's just it. So it ain't like I'm making these colors up. I'm pulling them from the earth and transcribing them to my creations. And there's nothing that gets me going more than like emerald greens and teals. My personal, so this particular piece, it's like it's done on an 1881 Atlantic Railroad ledger. And it's just like a face I conjured out of my mind for the chief, and with the war bonnet and the cross hatching. That's real interesting. I got to tell you a quick little story about that cross hatching right there. When I was in 2nd grade, I literally got sent to special ed because I was cross hatching all day. Hold on, I got to answer this. Told you I'm at an art thing. It's a new phone. Hold on, I can't turn it off. Anyway, I got sent to special ed And it was like a crazy deal because they almost jerked me out of class like I was a criminal. And I was thinking, where am I going? They marched me down the hallway. They opened up this door and there was a room full of puzzles and all kinds of stuff. And they said, you got to be here because you draw too much. And when they walked out the door, here's the craziest part. Here comes this lady that said, well, you're with me. Chances are you're going to be here all week. What do you want to do? I said, can I draw? She said, okay. All week I got to draw. And then when they sent me back to the regular classroom, I didn't like that. So I said, how could I get back there? And I just kept drawing. Pretty soon they figured me out and they just put a stop to that, I guess. But it's real interesting throughout the years. When that episode happened, it must have been about, I'm thinking 75 or 70s, 1976. So I got an interesting email out of the blue a few years ago about a teacher. She said, I apologize for like treating you mean about your art. She told me it'll never get me anywhere. And I wrote back to her and because she followed me on Instagram and stuff, and she said, I never thought you'll turn into what you are now. And I said, well, I didn't either. And I apologize if I didn't listen to you back then. And the rest is pretty much history. I meet these people throughout the years. And when I say career about art, it's just because I make a living at it. And I'm not trying to make it sound like super flamboyant in any fashion or form, but it's actually a career. I do it all year around. Take a week off once a year, just like a regular job. But it took me all over well, not all over the world, but Brazil, or Indigenous Cultural Art Exchange funded through the government. I showed the universities down there what I did, and they showed me what they did. And different regions of Switzerland, I did the leisure exhibitions. And sometimes I think that if I was to like go back in time and someone would say your art's going to take you to different places like that, and I wouldn't believe them. I mean, it'll be unheard of. But this is a contemporary piece, and if you switch the thing here, every now and then I like, this is on a 1881 Atlantic Road also. Every now and then I do a black and white, as much as I like color. But in my mind, I wish you could see more of the detail, but in my mind, when you do something in black and white, you just strive more with the detail to compensate for color. So when someone lays their eyes upon it, when I'm satisfied with it, they're not going to say, why is it colored? They're just going to like more or less really be impressed by the detail. And that's what I shoot for. And I was real proud of that piece, and it was a tough one to let go. Some of them are. And I hope to one day with my Uncle Jhon do a collaboration we talked about with a bridal. He'll do the silver work and I'll do the leather work, and we'll display it in front of this as a little ensemble. We can swap it on. This particular one, as you can see, if I know in the audience, there's probably a lot of heavy duty Oscar Howe fans and really know what his style is. So the circles you see in the back, just pretend the horses aren't there. But his style was kind of going through my mind that day. That's why I like kind of made the swirlies and stuff. And I think, what am I going to put in the middle? So I mean, obviously love horses. We're a horse culture, so I just intertwined them with it. And if you look real close, them circles are blending right into the horses. And it's just all about flow. And I kind of borrowed his colors a little bit. I just wanted to do it to get it out of my system. I mean, because he's always been a hero of mine. So it's just like when you play guitar, you're going to play a song by someone else that you like and someone else likes. It ain't yours, but it sounds good. It's just the same way I feel about art. And the sincerity of it all is I choose not to profit. If anything is remotely close to his style, I out of respect for him, I do not profit off of it. I give them away. The next one, I think there's a next one. This is the piece that I gave to my Auntie Mary here. And I signed it for her down there. And it's one of the pieces Oscar did, one of the ones that really intrigued me. The positioning, everything going on there, the flow, the movement, the stance, the subtle stop aspect of it. Just everything it had to offer. But when I approached it, I put different things into it to not make it just like his. And when Bryan was talking to me about it, he said, I can see how you put your own style in it. And that meant a lot to me because he not only studied under Oscar, but he knows art like nobody's business in the art world and music. And he's a comedian on weekends too. And that's where that one came about. And I just created it just out of just because he's my hero and stuff. And that particular piece brought me where I'm sitting today because Bryan was nice enough to submit it to the museum and say, this is what my good buddy does and all that. Before I know it, they contacted me. And but that's where that one derived. And I don't know if there's one more. Okay, I'm gonna have to tell how much more lies then. Anyway, going back to Oscar Howe, as far as like how I first got intrigued by him, I was 11 or 12 years old, and this I always wondered. Now that I got a panel here, so raise your hand if you ever seen one of them pencils in the 70s that like they dipped it and they're all swirly colors. Am I the only one that ever seen one of them? Did you seen that? Okay, now them pencils used to be cooler than hell. And when I got one, they're too pretty to use and I didn't sharpen them. And then when I looked at them, then I started seeing Oscar's work. And through innocence, my not knowing any better, I used to think, then I didn't know his name. I used to say, I wonder if the guy that drew that got his idea off this pencil. I thought that for the longest time because all the swirlies, and I was sitting in a super hot bus looking at all my pencils, and someone probably no wonder why they sent me to special ed. Good Lord. But it was because of that. And then before you know, as I got older in my teens, I really started seeing more and more of his work. But even as a little boy, I realized his brush control is unstoppable. I mean, I wish there was an artist that could probably come along and impress me personally like that. But seriously, there's not one person when you see Oscar Howe's work, his brush control is just off the charts. And I even realized that as a little boy. And that's my little interesting story about how I first found out about Oscar. And then Bryan, I'd like to talk about Bryan here for a bit. I'm going to tell you a story that I never told anybody, probably a few handful, maybe 4 or 5. And I know he ain't gonna mind if I tell it. I hope not. But we were at Crazy Horse Monument, and he was carving a flute, and I was about probably 30 feet from him. And the laser pointers, you remember the laser pointers? So I was all bored out, and we used to sell our work up there a long time ago. So I was like shining it in people's chest, and I was just doing that and watching people do this. And then Bryan, he was over there carving his flute. And then I shined that beam right at his hands when he was saying it. I never seen him jump so high in my life. And here's the funny part. I said, why did you jump? He said he thought his hands were on fire. And the best one is though, this is just so unreal. He was playing his flute one day, and everybody was just zoning because you do your craft while you're there. And he was playing his flute, and it was a beautiful day in August, about 5 o'clock. And as he was playing it, And I was getting mesmerized when he plays, and I was just watching him. And from outside the door came this little bluebird, and it flew and it landed on his shoulder. It was the most unreal thing. And I didn't say, everybody look, I was just captivated. And it turns funny because he's so calm, and while he's playing, he looked at it and the bird looked at him at the same time and it flew away. I mean, that's priceless. I mean, that's a true gift to play such beautiful flea music and bring a bluebird in from outside into the auditorium. So if that don't tell you that's a true gift, what he portrays, that's the epitome of a higher power giving him that gift and giving back in some way to have that bird land on his shoulder. And of all the times, there's several times I've been on the road with my Uncle Jhon, and when he goes to give the wonderful speeches, which he does with his impeccable knowledge, I'm always in the audience. I never thought I'd be up here with him. And it ain't easy. And I mean, I'll be as good as him one day. He's super humble. But it's just a real honor to be sitting up here with him, be in the presence of everybody who came to check out the scene and hear about what we all have to say. And I like to close with, there's nothing more heavy duty on this earth, in my personal opinion, than creating something that'll make someone cry. Thank you.
Are there questions? I can bring the microphone around.
TV radio? No, that's me. No, maybe with my cousin, Brian Highhorse. Yeah, he used to be the blues DJ there too. How many? I don't know. Never counted. But yeah. I know I try hard. I try to, anything I make, always make sure it has the Lakota title, I mean, those are just things we do. I never really noticed, but yeah, it's a good thing, speaking Lakota or saying things Lakota. It's a whole different dimension of thinking when you speak in Lakota. It's interrelational language. English language is noun driven. It's all everything that's measured and conjugated. Lakota language is all relational. That's why he talks in terms of, he calls me uncle, like she, he's a whole lot different when you're given your title of relationship, yeah. Thank you.
I have been encouraged, and I think others have, among the older and midlife people, but is it possible that the young people here have encouragement for each and all of us?
I'll just begin. Jhon, So I heard a really interesting story about you the other day, and I was wondering if you could tell us a little about it. We heard from Chad Nielsen about you and Bobby Penn going to the Denver Art Museum, or maybe some others to do research for the regalia and things that you were creating. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that and your relationship also to Oscar's student Bobby.
Oh, yeah, well. Bob Penn was a personal friend, you know, we were just young guys when we met, you know. He went to boarding school at St. Francis, St. Francis, South Dakota on the Rosebud Reservation. And myself, I was at the Marty Mission over here by Wagner, called Marty Mission, St. Paul's Indian Mission. But, you know, the only time we can kind of get off the mission is to play sports. So we traveled to other missions to play sports. So whenever we went far away, we went from Marty to St. Francis. We stayed overnight there. So we got to socialize and meet, talk. And, you know, anyway, that extends over to, you know, when you're friends and you run into each other so many times, all of a sudden everything, you're just, I'm friends, you know. You know, interesting when I think about my friend Bob Penn, you know, of course, he was a protege of Oscar Howe, and maybe he's the reason why I never became a painter. He was damn good, you know. And myself, I wanted to distinguish myself as well. So maybe that's why I went into metalwork and personal adornment, because it was a niche too for Lakota people. Maybe people understand the Lakota were metalworkers as well, you know. So. But yeah, Bob was special. What I really like to talk about is the fact that, you know, you see all his paintings, he's so eclectic. You know, he all the faces of his individuals in his paintings were composites of all the Lakota people he knew. You know, it's kind of interesting. No individual he really profiled, but it was a composite of Lakota people, I would say. And he did landscapes. All his media, multitude of different mediums he used. You know, lithographs, oils, watercolors, gouache. You know, even we did woodcuts. You know, but you know, he was in exhibitions. You know, in a sense like Northern Plains Tribal Arts. You know, he joined all of them. But you know, I look at him. He wasn't so much a market-driven artist as we see today. You know, his art kind of always reflected the culture in itself. You know, we look at the the sisters painting. You know, that's kind of. He's one of, when I looked at it, we see all his art in its totality. He's probably one of the first artists I ever seen that really painted women. You know, of course, today we live in a society of modernity and it's always male oriented, but the painting he did of his grandmother with horses on it, that's probably one of my favorites. I think of was his horses and a grandma. He and I were house stories because we were both raised and influenced by our grandmothers, you know. So maybe that was one of the ties that bound us as well. But you know, he wanted to learn how to dance. You know, so I helped create his dance outfit. You know, so there's some old pictures I seen that were taken at the University of South Dakota. He and I dancing as young boys. Back there, we were teenagers. You know, yeah, that's kind of special. And then my cousin sent me a menu from a restaurant in Chamberlain. Here, there's a picture of me and Bob Penn and our dance regalia on that. So anyway, so there's all kinds of little things that pop up, you know, that remind me of that relationship he had. But you know, in the Lakota world, there's a term for friendships called kola. Then when you say that word in another emphasis, kola, it's almost like brotherhood relationship. So kind of had that feeling with him, you know. One of his girlfriends, you know, that didn't want to marry him because he had a lot of girlfriends. She had his self-portrait, you know, and then she eventually gave it to me, you know. So I mean, there's so many things that, that Bob did like that, but having his self-portrait, kind of said something to me that he still wanted to, I don't know, I keep his memory alive that way, by having that portrait, talking about him as a friend. I was one of the co-curators of an exhibition 2 years ago in Rapid City called the Okiksuye. It's a Lakota word that means remembrance. Brought together probably, I think, 77 of Bob Penn's paintings from most of the collections in East River, some from my personal collections as well as others, we had them on display there at the Doll Center. Former student came in, sang honor songs, and yeah, it was quite a gathering. It was a Okiksuye. All the other exhibitions that were had, he was part of them, just to bring all his paintings like that. Really look at it, it's like he can feel a spirit there, Because I lived in Rapid City, that exhibition was in Rapid City. Well, once or twice a week, I'd go there and just sit with him and remember him like that. And so you walk up to his paintings, just like we do with Oscars, you can see that every brushstroke is a power movement. It's a spirit. It's as an artist, every movement you put into something, you almost have like sometime a feeling of a higher power coming through you to make something. It leaves what I call spirit memory. So I see all these things that we do in the Lakota world, even the ancestral things that are in museums. There's a spirit memory in them, So I consider Bob and all the other artists before us, their spirits are still with us. It's a creative spirit that's eternal, just like the creation story. I'm glad we're doing an exhibition because it brings us back to the origins of what we believe in our relationships as a social system. We believe in spirituality, moon and the sun and the winds, light, dark, like I said, all in concert, So you look at Bob Penn's paintings, you always see there's a moon in there. There's always a sun sometimes, the stars, the lightning, the powers of nature. I could go on and on, like that. But, so my relationship with Bob it goes back to personal times when it's Kola. We danced together, we one of the last things I did when they were taking down the exhibition, I brought my drum in there and I sang not so much spiritual holy songs, but just powwow songs. Or chill, just kind of bringing that good feeling back about, good memories. That's all I want to keep alive, good memories. That's why. Thank you for the question. Kind of makes me feel good. Hopefully that makes you all feel good about art and what it does. Yeah. Oh, dámelo.
So you mentioned some of these places you got to go. What have been some of the other places that art has opened doors, opportunities for you to see that are other than the United States? Like what other countries have you been able to go to because of your art?
Just Suriname, Brazil, and Switzerland. Them are the only two as far as being abroad. Just the experiences there were just like unreal. I mean, I wouldn't have never been sitting here today. I almost got murdered in Brazil. I got like mugged on her. You would think the government would tell you I was funded by the government. So the personnel that was in charge of me, like watching me and taxiing me around, they didn't tell me that there was freelance taxis outside the hotel where they do what they want. They're not legitimate, but they look professional. Yeah, it ain't fun getting taken 40 miles into the jungle and all they wanted was $15. I said, I'll give you 20. If that's all you want, good Lord, just leave me at the hotel. But yeah, it was an interesting time though, but it's just Brazil and Switzerland, different regions and different parts of the cities. in Switzerland.
Several of your paintings with legends, and Sam, what was your thinking when you were using that as the background? And then especially because they were probably old, how did they put it up to you with those beautiful paintings?
Well, that, first of all, them ledger books, that paper is made stronger than the paper than that it's made today. They're almost like a dollar bill strength, and they got a watermark in it, the real legitimate ones. So that paper will outlast the contemporary paper all day long. And your other question was why I did it on the ledger, or was that it? Okay, well, that my ancestors actually invented that whole genre in the 1800s. At one time, we depicted our heroic deeds and our Kodak moments, as you say, on rock and did different types of deer-hide, elk-hide, bear, wolf, just like paint it, roll it up, and it's a historical thing that other than oral history, they could roll that out and show generations to come what they used to draw on and paint. And when we got confined to reservation, check 1, 2. When we got confined to reservations, it was called a warrior's art in like the 1900s, because and in prison art also. And it was only the warriors that really concentrated on ledger art. And back then it wasn't a contest. So when you see this, I tell people in many different functions I go to and I explain the same stories. Google, if you're not familiar with it, Google ledger art, and you can see it almost looks like a 5-year-old did it. But back then it wasn't a competition. They knew the whole anatomy of everything they drew as far as the animals and everything, but it wasn't like real neat or nothing. They're just getting the point across. And what I like to preach is how everything evolves on this earth. Is ledger art is evolving too, and I preach that all the time. So where I'm taking ledger art, I'm not swaying away from the symbolic history of my ancestors, but I'm just making it evolve into putting different kind of pictures on there, but still keeping the same Native American symbolism on it. So that genre has been around for a rather long time. There's women that do it now too. I hope that answered your question. You're welcome.
Just I guess the advice would be just to, once you get started, just continue to do what you're doing. I haven't really been beading lately, but I just got started again in January, and to me it's kind of like therapeutic, therapy for me and I do it every day, and just to bead every day, every single day, whenever you get the chance.
How much pieces of beadwork we made? Is that what you said?
I really can't say. It's been a lot though, because I really can't say how many pieces of beadwork I have done. It's been a lot though.
And as artists, I've heard it all three of your applications is this connection to nature. And of course, nature has patterns and cycles, and I love how you say you draw the colors from nature. And so if it's okay to ask, may I ask how your artwork has connected you to your own patterns and cycles in your own life as your art has carried you to this point in your life, seeing yourself and becoming aware of your own cycles and patterns through your art?
You mean like how it's, how I noticed how it evolved, or I mean, if I can answer it right, if I know what you're talking about, art itself, like before I used to just do it on like a snowy day when you can't run outside, but as you get older, you think, okay, well, maybe I could like show a little bit more people, but it ain't all about showing people. It's just, in my mind, I was thinking how good I can get with what I'm trying to accomplish. And I feel I'm nowhere near what I'm trying to accomplish. I'm not nowhere near that. I was telling people this grim reality. I'll be on my deathbed one day with millions of ideas going through my head that I never got to finish. I mean, it's just, it's a never ending thing. I know this is going to kind of maybe sound a little, it might be, forgive me if it's offending in some way, but the way I look at it, and just my Uncle Jhon always tells me too, like just to be truthful with yourself and with your client and life, everything. And more so your art, because you're selling your soul to, but what I'm going to say is a true artist, from what I choose to believe in my heart, a true artist ain't going to scratch his head until the cows come home trying to seek realism, trying to seek something that is out of his range. He's going to do something he's comfortable with, and he's always going to strive and scratch and climb up that hill to get to that point, which he can't explain to anybody what's up there, only he does. So he's just going to keep doing it. Long story short is, a true artist is going to portray exaggeration on anything he does, and let technique, which everybody and their brother knows, go down the road without him. He'll stay back and he'll just say, I'm going to do it my way. So when you see my style of horses, people always ask, how come that mane looks like that? And I just did that unconsciously, knowing that that's exaggeration. It'll be more easy to make a wisping mane than to do what I do that you see on all my ledger work. But I choose to do it that way in an effigy form, and it equals flow. So just that mane alone is gonna carve a path for everything else in that drawing to go this way, swoop up, and boom, right on into the abyss. So that's where my colors are gonna go, and all my shapes off that mane right there. I feel I didn't have to explain it until I got asked that more times than once, but that's why I do just that mane. Tells, it's a tattletale picture, tattletale sign of how the whole drawing is going to go. I wish I can explain it better, but maybe one day I will.
Very wonderful garden. Working in this way, on sometimes. I think we have worked for USC medical school doing wrong. For the medical school.
Well, just what I know, he never really ever talked about it, but I did hear somewhere that he did those, well, you know, you go to a doctor's office, see posters of, you know, parts of the body and you know, some of our organs and, you know, yeah, there's work that artists do like that, you know, it pays well, or I guess you could say, but it's not their intention to earn a living doing that. So I think even to this day, a lot of other artists, I mean, we do what we call butter and bread or bread and butter, you know, art, you know. So I think that might fall in that category, I guess, you know, but oh yeah. Mhm.
But to draw from the anatomy of human body, you have to, and to use it in your medical study, you have to be very, very fast.
Yeah, no, yeah, well, I've heard it somewhere, like, he didn't really speak of it, but, you know, I've heard that somewhere, maybe some researcher exposed that, I guess you could say, you know, yeah. Yeah, but it's interesting, I guess, you know, as an artist, I guess you could say if they did some kind of an anatomy that even adds to the depth of their art and some of those things, because like Evans was talking about, you know, and I've seen it done the same thing in the indigenous maps. They weren't to scale, but they were done for purpose, you know. Yeah, so, but the native people knew every animal anatomically because they had to process them, you know. And that's what I was explaining. We visit a lot, Evans and I, and I was driving down the road was the best thing that we did, just visiting and talking, and I had telling things about our ancestors, you know, that I knew. But yeah, and I was talking about how my grandmother and them used to process beef, you know. They're mimicking the old time ways of how they processed buffalo, you know, and how they knew the anatomy of the buffalo really well, that they knew all the different muscle parts and what made the best cuts for making dried meat and wasna, and, you know, it just goes on. And then how they processed all the fat, you know, because fat is really optimal power food for that we need, you know, where it's good for your brain, fat, you know, and everybody says fat is bad, but that was in essence for survival out on the plains, is to have that protein and also the fats, you know, so it just goes on and on. So that anatomy, you know, that anatomy thing is really critical, you know, especially I'd say. So I think that's just part of what you're asking was Bob Penn's experience, you know, not afraid to do anything because you learn something all the time. Yeah.
I have a question.
Hey, Joe.
So, you know, I was lucky enough to have Mr. Penn as my mentor in college. And this question is for you and Mr. Akipa. When he used to talk about lessons that he would hear, that he learned from Oscar Howe. One was about when you create work, to do it as accurately, when you depict something, be accurate, be authentic in that work. And I was wondering maybe what lesson you had heard from Oscar Howe, or what Herman had expressed to you in his lessons from Oscar Howe. Is there something that stood out from interactions with them? Was there a like a direct lesson from Oscar Howe that sort of resonates with you these years later.
Yeah, he just, he was just saying, just to keep at it. And one day you'll be the best in what you do. So that's what it takes.
Mr. Bryan Akipa, everyone, an honored guest. And it gave me the moment that I needed to let our artists know that people are leaving because there's a football game. So you guys have been wonderful, and we're so honored that you have been here to share your stories and your art with us. And we are, as always, very honored to be hosting the Dakota Modern exhibition and the Continuum exhibition. And we are sad to see it go, I will tell you all. So while you're here tonight, please take a moment to see it. It does come down, so September 17th is the last day. Take a moment to read through the guest books to see how it's touched other people's lives and the experiences and the stories that they have shared. And come out on September the 12th and celebrate with us. We are going to have Isanti up here to rock us out at the end of our closing ceremonies here for these incredible exhibitions. But again, thank you so much for coming here tonight, and thank you to our artists for honoring us with your stories and your work. So please help me thank them.